What's coming off around here?
If you guys playing railroad anymore today, there's a landslide, a new cut.
Well, welcome to episode 6 of Fun with HO Scale Stuff. This is part 1 of my benchwork for the first module that will be constructed for the Lehigh Valley Terminal Railroad scale model. It's an HO scale model. And before I show the planning, I wanted to just share with whoever happens upon this video that there's a few things that I've just taken out of storage and still all dusty and everything, but I thought perhaps some might be interested in these things. This is a, look at this way, it's a Norfolk Southern 30th anniversary heritage pin set. Then this has pins for all of the Norfolk Southern's predecessor railroads. And this is really a pretty box. My brother worked for Norfolk Southern for many years. When he graduated from college, he went right to work for Norfolk Southern, and he retired a few years back. And so some of the things he's given me over the years included this beautiful pin set. And I don't know if it's possible to see, but this is on the lid, a description of the relationship of each of these fallen flags as it pertains to the Norfolk and Western. And they're really quite nice. I'm really happy he gave this to me. I like looking at it, but it's been in storage for a while. Unfortunately, I should keep it out. In fact, I will now. But there's that. Okay, put this away for a moment and show you some other things that I was able to get. This is a brochure for the Roanoke car shops. He had worked at Roanoke for a while. He's worked at a number of different locations for Norfolk Southern. I believe the last place he worked for them, he was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But, anyone that likes Norfolk Southern, I'm sure, is very familiar with the Roanoke car shops. And it goes through and gives a little history of the car shops and also shows a layout of the car shops. This layout's pretty interesting. It labels every one of the buildings, and it describes basically what they do, and more about the buildings than the different steps that each one of those contributes to the overall maintenance of the railroad's fleet. Pretty neat. Kind of like that. He also gave me, this is a listing of the equipment that Norfolk Southern had in 1993. And it just goes through and details all of them. It also comes with drawings, dimensions for the locomotives that they had. Quite nice reference information if you happen to be a Norfolk Southern modeler. I'm not, so I'm doing a short line, but this is pretty neat. And anyway, it gives me a good idea about what the appearance of a finished locomotive ought to be. And I got this. This is it's a timetable. This is number 1, and it's the Kentucky division, and it lists all of the different. Just make sure you can see that. It lists all of the different stations, and there are the station times and things. But it's more than that because it details. It has. It's quite detailed. It talks about rules. It has speed limits. On the division, this division, and it shows the rail map, and then on each one it's got annotated the speed limit on it, and then different limitations and restrictions that go along with the this is all the information that an engineer would need on this division to be able to navigate it correctly. I think he said that they are actually required to memorize this and have to be tested on it periodically to make sure that they can answer questions about the division. So I think that would be beyond me. So the other thing is I just wanted to just show, this is my original copy of the film Danger Lights. I like found this a long time ago I bought it online, and it goes back, well, it's a VHS, so it goes back quite a long way. We don't use VHS anymore, but yeah, that was my original copy. And I still watch that movie from time to time, but I watch it online. So this episode is about benchwork, and some may not be familiar with that term. It's a common term used throughout the model railroading hobby to just describe the platform that your model railroad sets on. There's many ways to build a benchwork, and you'll find researching through the various literatures and online that there's many different types of recommendations. One of the references I used is this short book from Model Railroader. This is a Lynn Westcott publication, and there he describes benchwork. This was the L girder construction. So it doesn't have to be really this complicated. It may seem like a lot. You could use 2 sawhorses and a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and that could be your benchwork. Depending on what your ultimate goals are, it's going to dictate, or should dictate, what your choice of construction is. When I looked through all of the literature, I came up with like 4 basic types of benchwork construction methods. One was the what they call L girder, and that's what Lynn was just showing us, was an L girder construction. Another is called cookie cutter. Cookie cutter would be where you just have you start with a large uncut sheet of plywood, but you just cut out the sections of the plywood that you plan on running your track on. And that particular approach would require a whole lot more discipline than I have, because I have no idea where my track's going to be yet. The other method is called an open grid, and it's a lot like the L girder, except that with L girder the idea is to support a flat sheet, whereas with open grid it zigzags up and down. You can have a stretch at one level and then drop off entirely to a different level where you want to have a gorge or something. Then there's the shelf brackets. So there's shelf brackets is where you mount your railroad platform to a wall, and you use it in a way that is very much like putting up shelving on a wall, and so the support actually is the wall itself. I have an open area where I plan on placing the model railroad, and I plan on building the railroad in segments. So each segment will be a 2-foot by 8-foot section, and these different sections will ultimately be joined together to form the final railroad, whatever that turns out to be. I don't know yet, but because of my desire, my unique application, I've decided to use an adaptation of the L girder type approach. I'm not sure it'll look something like what I've sketched out here. I'm not sure it's going to be exactly like this, but I will try to follow my design here as much as possible, because I want them to be, all of the sections, I want them to be the same so that they fit together and I have a predictable space. for each one of them. And I'll gain, as I go along, I'll gain more and more insight into what the best way is to utilize these structures. So this is what I came up with. So having established the type of benchwork construction that I want to use, the next thing that I want to discuss would be the viewing angle of the benchwork. What is its height in terms of, with respect to how you look at it and how you interact with it. And there's a lot of information again on the internet and in books that pretty much discuss what opportunities might be available. And of course, every choice anyone might make is a personal choice. I'm approximately 6 foot tall. So in my decision making, I needed to decide, did I want to be seated or did I want to be standing? And I gave it some thought, and I decided finally on going with a standing position, because I can be standing, or I could also be sitting on a tall stool and get pretty much a very similar view and access to the benchwork surface. So it's important that you have a comfortable reach and easy access, because you don't want to reach into benchwork and be knocking things over and breaking things and just become frustrated with the whole model railroad. So I've decided on, for my purposes, with a 6 foot tall body, that the viewing angle here gave me a 4 foot leg for the start of the benchwork surface. So because you build up from there, it'll actually raise up the, there's foam on top of that structure, and then there's buildings and track and scenery, hills that go on top of it. So I figure 4 foot for me is going to be ideal, and I should be able to interact with the model railroad on top of this frame reasonably well, and that's the whole key. So the fact that I'm going to build a bunch of these units eventually is also very important, that I get set on a particular height right now. So I had gotten my ideas from my other reference materials, but this one has, their drawings are about as good as mine. Then they did reference how someone might have to stand up on a step stool in order to access like a mountain scene or something that's been elevated. They also, these are things that you want to take into consideration if you're going to be building tall mountains. And they also have, it slipped down on me. There it is. More cartoons, a little bit better quality than what I draw. Here they show the accessibility to, if you're going to use an elevated 2-level railroad, that you would have to consider providing some kind of way to elevate the operators so they can interact with it. But I'm not going to do that. I don't like it. So, but just something that I thought I'd point out for whoever's, happened upon this. This is a pretty good reference. And I like this because it also covers a lot about joinery. So I'm no carpenter, and this is actually quite helpful in terms of figuring out how to put things together. Okay, so I'll go back to my drawing. This is what I've decided on, and I'm gonna proceed with this. If you're trying to build these things on a budget, it's kind of tough right now because the cost of lumber is so high, and when you can get it, it oftentimes is in pretty shabby condition. And so what I did was I went to one of the hardware stores online, and I checked out pricing, and I decided, okay, on the plywood I was thinking 3/4 inch 4x8, and they don't sell it by 3/4 is not something they do. It's called 23 by 32. But anyway, that was supposed to cost about $40. Then I figured I'd need about 9 of these 1x4x8s, and that would cost me total $32. And then 2 of these 2x2x8s for $10. Then the foam, which is they call formula, I guess, 150, and that's an inch and a half thick. I thought that would be plenty for me. That's $28. And then some Loctite adhesive to glue it all together. So referencing back, the 2x2x4s are the legs. The 1x4s will be these side, end, and middle pieces to make the box that goes on the top and on the bottom. And that's pretty much it. Now, I did mark down here 1x4 or 1x3 because I just don't know what I'm going to encounter when I go to the hardware store to pick up wood. So I gave myself an option. I can deal with 1x3 as well. It kind of goes back to a statement I made earlier about you don't have to necessarily overbuild this bench because the kind of material I plan on using for my own personal use is I'm going to use foam. I'll build up terrain using foam pieces, and then I'm going to coat the foam pieces with paper mache effectively, and that'll all get finished up. But on this particular, on the first flat, the very first benchwork is really going to be flat because it's a yard. It's going to be a service facility, and the service facilities are always placed in flat areas where the railroad can just run the track in, put up their buildings, and they don't have to. You don't have to contend with going across bridges or having to deal with a lot of elevations and changing elevations. So this is the plan going forward. See what I can do in terms of buying the lumber and the foam and adhesive and screws and on. But my total guesstimation is this is going to cost me around $90. So it's a lot more than you're going to be spending on paper route money, I guess. But the thing is, there's not a cheaper way unless you just go with a flat, like just putting a flat piece of plywood on top of some supports, which will work. If you're just starting out in the hobby and that's just a goal is to just simply start running some trains, some simple things like that can get you going, and it'd be quite entertaining. So I'm not trying to rain on anybody's approach. I'm just saying this is what I've decided to do for myself. Okay, so the next thing I want to do in the next episode will be episode 7, is to actually show you the assembly and have some discussion about what's good and what's bad about it. And you try and keep in mind too, I don't want to stress it, but I will mention it just now, is that this is my first shot at this, so it's not going to be, cabinetry beautiful. It's going to be kind of rough. And I'm just hoping that, when I finally get it all together, it doesn't wobble, it's going to be pretty nasty. So, yeah, we'll see how it works out. Next video. Thank you for watching. If you would, please like and subscribe. And one other thing I'd like to ask is if you could drop a simple comment like hi or I'm here, because I don't know, I can't tell who's watching or who's liking this effort by me. And that was another thing I might mention here in closing, is that all of this YouTube presentation is brand new to me. And so there's been a lot of learning curve on my part. And I'm really trying to get better at it. And some feedback would be helpful. So thank you for that. Thanks again for watching. And if you would please like and subscribe.